I think that especially this motto, Chofshi Be'artzenu, this idea of what it means to twist this fragment of a verse from Hatikvah and turn it, as we said, into the opposite of its original meaning, so that instead of it being about the freedom of the Jewish people to be their own nation in their own land, and turning it instead into the freedom of some portion of Jews in the land of Israel to be free to remain more beholden to foreign standards, rather than in the imagination of such people being forced to participate in a society that's too Judaic in its outlook. That negative fantasy is, I think, ultimately driven by a narrative about how all of this is working that is fundamentally setting its gaze to the gods of other nations. And you see that, in every little news clipping about this. I mean, there was a story, I don't know, 2 days ago or whatever it was in Times of Israel about sympathy protesters in New York City, who were riding a boat in front of the Statue of Liberty while protesting the judicial reforms that are being proposed here in Israel. And it's so funny because the Statue of Liberty is literally a giant statue that was made to symbolize a limited principle, some idea of liberty. So not even to be some symbol of a God who represents everything, but just kind of a deification of a limited notion. Liberty's nice, liberty's good, liberty's part of the package of what the Torah wants to teach us about, but it's not the only thing. It has to be balanced against other things. And it's so interesting to see how, in order to express themselves, this group of, I think, American Jews and Israelis who wanted to state their opposition to the judicial reform, they wanted to make use of this idol, this foreign idol, this limited idol that's trying to idealize the notion of liberty. And by doing so, it's really about saying, look, the American ideal is what we want, or, the American or Western ideal. And that's one that's supposed to get you certain results in terms of individual liberty. And the fear, of course, is that the Torah isn't going to get you exactly those same results. And by the same token, the United States is so concerned about those results that it's, of course, much more trying to oppose the judicial reform, even though the judicial reform would make the Israeli system of government more like the American system of government, because the U.S. is not really interested in Israel having an American-style democracy, but rather having outcomes in the Israeli system that more closely or most closely match the outcomes that the American system is getting from its democratic process, wherever it's currently holding. And so what comes into the spotlight is anything that an individual wants to be free to do. The claim, the accusation is that allowing actual American-style democracy in Israel could potentially lead to a retrenchment of individual liberty. It would make the Statue of Liberty unhappy. It would displease the God represented by the Statue of Liberty, and that's the thing that we have to struggle against, because that limited idol is the standard where we set our gaze. That more or less is the sort of thought process behind all the arguments that are being raised about the judicial reform here currently. And it's there's layer upon layer of hypocrisy in this, because it's not really, even in a principled sense, some kind of libertarian argument about the importance of individual liberty over everything. Israel is quite a socialist country and has for decades actually been a place where all sorts of issues of individual liberty have been swept aside by the muscle of a powerful socialist state. And when individual liberty gets steamrolled by socialism, people here are used to not complaining about that or even being capable of asking the question whether things should work that way, right? So whatever kind of rules or regulations about how you build your house, or what gets to be a school or a hospital or what doesn't, or everything else, that socialist straitjacket doesn't get questioned when people talk about the importance of being chofshi be'artzenu. But a certain subset of things, and I would say a particular subset of things that really are more about where might the Torah start to, in some way, limit people in what they can or can't do. That is what the word chofshi in that dog whistling way is trying to refer to and is trying to evoke. And I think what all that points to is that the society is sorely in need of a real conversation about the role of government and the role of the state, that includes a discussion about individual liberty and what rights individuals may have against the state. But that is kind of a perpendicular thing to talking about the role that the Torah can play in society. And there are all sorts of things that one might want the liberty to do because it's going to allow you to keep the Torah, again, that no one raising the banner of being chofshi be'artzenu seems very concerned about right now, like what freedoms to keep the Torah are currently being trampled, and how can we make people more free to, for example, settle the land of Israel and defend themselves, because that's also an issue of individual liberty, instead of being straitjacketed by a state that makes rules for what people can or can't do. So perhaps the first way to get people to the table to have a real conversation might be to say, okay, if you want to be chofshi be'artzenu, if we want to have a conversation about liberty, let's make a distinction here and recognize that the real thing on the table here is what power should the state have, what powers should the state not have. And that's both a discussion that pertains to the role that the Torah plays in people's lives, and also a discussion that pertains to the role that the state plays in people's lives that has nothing to do with the Torah. But you can't just say you want freedom for everyone, and then in reality you're saying, and what I mean by that is, I want the state to absolutely guarantee that the Torah can never in any way somehow be the reason that I am less free, but I'm perfectly happy for other people to be less free to keep the Torah. I'm perfectly happy for I and others to be less free to do all sorts of things medically or educationally or whatever else because of the strong arm of the socialist state. But I just want us to be chofshi be'artzenu in a way that's constructed to oppose the Torah. That's the Korachite rebellion, and that's the kind of division within the nation that has to be struggled against.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.